This video really isn't clickbait. It was going to be a quick response to the whole Jako Mura situation, but rather than rehash what's already been said, I want to use it as a jumping off point to talk about something much bigger. Now, if you aren't familiar with this story, Jako Mura is an internet guitarist who was basically caught posting misleading videos in which he performed solos that were taken from lesser known players, but then passed off as his own improvisations. Not even compositions, but actual improvisations. And to top it off, he had to mime everything because he didn't actually have the chops to perform them correctly. Now, I'll include the link to the original debunking video by YouTube bass player Danny Sapko in the description for those of you who want to get into the details of that whole thing. But anyway, that story got me thinking about how the internet, with social media in particular, is completely reshaping how we hear music and how we interpret musical expression. And even though it has been an incredible tool for musicians and fans to connect, engage, discover, and enjoy music more than ever before, it's ultimately going to ruin it for everyone. Whether you find that thought scary or you think I'm exaggerating, just hear me out for the next few minutes and then we can have a conversation in the comments. I'm going to take a quick little detour for context, but bear with me and I promise it'll all make sense. I've been a fan of heavy metal music for over 40 years and a guitar player for almost as long. I started playing in 1988, so it was a few years after Eddie, Randy, and Yngwie just blew everyone's minds and inspired a new generation of players to work on their chops. And even then, things were already moving on to the more progressive styles of Satriani and Vai. There was an entire record label, brilliantly named Shrapnel Records, dedicated to virtuoso guitar players. And it launched the careers of some incredibly talented musicians who became hugely influential and that are still active today. Paul Gilbert, Marty Friedman, Richie Kotzen, Jason Becker, Tony McAlpine, Vinnie Moore, and Greg Howe. With all of that, it seemed like guitarists couldn't possibly get any better, faster, or more inventive. And you could sense that there was a sort of shred fatigue that was starting to set in. And then one song came out with the most basic riff ever, made up of just 4 power chords, and all of that disappeared, pretty much instantly. Heavy metal? Gone. Pointy guitars? Gone. Flashy hair and clothes? Gone. Pedal point riffs? Gone. Guitar solos and technical playing of any kind? Gone. And you want to know the best part? Everyone, including many of those guitarists who spent all those years busting their asses trying to develop better chops than everyone else, was super happy about this. Words like authenticity, real music, feel, simplicity, back to basics, the 60s, the 70s, Hendrix, Page, Clapton, and Iommi. All of these terms quickly became the mantra of musicians all over the world as they traded their spandex for cutoff jeans and cargo shorts, their leather jackets for flannel shirts, and their guitar solos for short breakdown riffs that, for some reason, always ended on a dissonant note. With bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains, grunge music, as it was called, saved the world from the fake, plastic, inauthentic heavy metal and shred that had become corrupted by corporate greed. Except those bands weren't trying to replace anything or save anyone. They were just bands who had their own sound and style. Many of those guys were actually fans of heavy metal music. They had really great, although different, musicianship, and they all had guitar solos in their songs. Even Nirvana. What most people failed to realize at the time is that the same systems were still in place and that these new artists were being shoved in their faces for the same reasons. None of it had anything to do with the love of music, culture, or the need for authenticity. It was all about developing a trend, having it blow up worldwide, squeezing as much profit as possible out of it, and then discarding it for the next big thing just before it becomes unprofitable. In fact, the grunge thing was extremely short-lived, as it was quickly replaced with the less depressing and more marketable genres of alternative rock, pop punk, and nu metal. And now, for the last 20 years, we've all agreed that heavy metal was in fact really great, palm-muted pedal point riffs are at least as acceptable as 035 riffs in drop tuning, and that guitar solos are really cool. But that's not where it ends. Far from it. Because with the advent of social media, the race for extreme technical virtuosity has been rebooted. Only this time around, musicians are no longer constrained by the limits of their physical ability, how young they are when they start, who their teacher is, or how many hours a day they can work on their skills. Technology has essentially turned the modern musician into a cyborg. Every day, our social media feeds are flooded with singers in their kitchen, drummers in their basement, and guitarists in their messy bedroom, casually and just effortlessly delivering the most incredibly flawless, technically accurate, pristinely clean performances of themselves covering a variety of demanding songs. And it's not uncommon to see comments saying things like, "Wow, this is better than the original." What is uncommon is for the person posting to mention that they mimed the whole thing, they used pitch correction and auto-tune, triggered the drums, or recorded the guitar over 74 takes, with the hardest parts punched in afterward. Instead, they go to great lengths to make it all look like a live performance. A single take captured effortlessly with big smiles and no apparent effort. And over time, this is messing with how we define musical skill. I see comments under live footage of players like Zakk Wylde, Marty Friedman, or even John Petrcucci, calling them sloppy or saying, he's getting old. Often from people who can't actually play any of it. But they've seen it all performed flawlessly online with every note surgically cleaned up, so their ears have become trained to expect perfection. A lot of it doesn't even sound like guitar anymore. It sounds like MIDI or like hitting play on a Guitar Pro tab. Do yourself a favor and look up some of your favorite solos right here on YouTube, like Crazy Train Guitar Solo Isolated. You'll hear the occasional string noise, slurred notes, slightly out of tune bend, or out of time phrase, but you'll also hear the full musical expression of a human being just going for it in the studio. You'll hear them trying to find that ideal balance between getting a clean, solid take and one that is emotionally charged and in the moment. The thing is, the music industry is constantly evolving, adapting with and often anticipating the current trends. There are more guitars being sold now than ever before, and the amount of new music-related content released daily is just astounding. But behind that explosion is a massive ecosystem. Brands, gear manufacturers, software companies. They know exactly how this content is being made. They know that many of the creators they sponsor rely on editing, miming, and other tricks to deliver hyper-polished performances that rack up views. And for the most part, they're fine with it because as long as the content performs well, the gear sells. Then when someone like Jako Mura gets exposed, a company will quickly and quietly distance itself. They weren't blind to what was going on. The content was performing, the numbers looked good, and to be fair, it's not really their job to judge artistic integrity. Their job is to move product, build visibility, and stay aligned with the audiences that they're trying to reach. Unfortunately, the blowback doesn't just affect the audience. It affects every musician who's really putting in the work. When something like this happens, some brands become more careful and then less willing to take risks. They might prioritize working with creators and influencers who know how to work the system. That puts more pressure on everyone else to follow the same playbook just to stay visible. And for fans, it sets a standard that makes even the most genuine performances feel underwhelming by comparison. So in the end, everyone loses. The audience gets a warped sense of what real musicianship sounds like, the companies risk their hard-earned credibility and reputation, and the artists who are actually putting in the work are left navigating a space that often rewards perceived perfection over raw authenticity. So what about me? How do I fit into all of this, and how do I define authenticity? My outlook is simple and straightforward, with a bit of nuance depending on the context. When it comes to stealing someone else's music, you don't do it, period. And I can't understand why anyone would even want to. Now, quoting your influences, referencing a familiar melody, or nodding to a particular lick, motif, or riff, that's normal. It's been part of music forever, and when it's done well, it can be really cool. But passing off someone else's composition as your own, that's inexcusable. The fact that someone could knowingly do that and still find a way to rationalize it to themselves makes no sense to me. With miming, there's a bit more room for nuance and context, but the general rule is simple. Just be honest about what you're presenting. If you're making something like a music video where you're in a forest or on a rooftop or whatever, no one expects you to be actually playing live. You're clearly playing along to something that you recorded in your studio. That's totally fine. The only line that I draw is this: don't record something you can't actually play. If the technique isn't yours, if you don't have the chops to perform it for real, then it doesn't belong in your video, no matter how cool it sounds. If it's a playthrough video, chances are you're recording most of it live, but some shots might be mimed. In my own case, I make playthroughs mainly for entertainment and to show how the different guitar parts in a song might be played. I'm not playing anything that demands real virtuosity, so it's not about showing off technical skill. I play along to the backing track and record each take. I like to shoot from 3 different angles: a frontal view, a close-up of the picking hand, and then one from the neck. But since I don't have space to set up 3 cameras at once comfortably, I record them separately. So if a song has 3 guitar parts, like some Iron Maiden tracks do, I'm doing 9 separate takes. For the audio, I'll typically use 1 full take per guitar part. But if one of the camera angles captures more detail, like a vibrato, slide, or articulation, then I might splice in audio from that specific take to match what you're seeing. And when it comes to solos, I always try to use 1 clean, accurate take from the front camera, so the bends, vibrato, and phrasing in the video actually match what you're hearing. And that part really matters, especially if a less experienced player is using my video to learn the solo. These playthrough videos are a lot of work, and they take a lot of time to put together. So if I have solid takes and there might be a note here or there that didn't come out just right, and it's annoying to listen to, I have no issue with punching it in to make it sound better. If it still sounds okay, then I'll leave it in because I don't need every note to be perfect. I'm not perfect, I make mistakes even on stage, so really who cares? Other times I'll share raw takes, so no backing track or no edits or clips of me playing live on stage. And if I say something is live, then it has to be live, not live-ish, not more or less live. If I say I'm just jamming, I don't think you, the viewer, should expect flawless, ultra-clean, mistake-free playing. That kind of perfection just isn't realistic for most musicians. Ultimately, I make these videos to inspire and encourage. And I think that's true for most of your favorite creators. But when everything we post is polished and flawless, even if it's not dishonest, it can start to feel less like inspiration and more like the weight of an unrealistic standard. And a lot of the time, it's not really about making the content better. It's about protecting our own ego. To be perfectly honest, making videos like the ones on this channel comes with a very real pressure, as well as the occasional bout of imposter syndrome. As much as the comment section can be supportive and motivating, it can also be brutal and filled with insults, trolls, and now more bots than ever. So the urge to only post pristine takes is perfectly understandable. But we as creators have a responsibility to represent real musicianship honestly. If we're putting our work out there for people to learn from or be inspired by, then we owe it to them to show what playing actually looks and sounds like. And you know, if legends like Freddie Mercury or Eddie Van Halen could leave the occasional pitchy note or sloppy lick in their recordings and we still recognize them as the greats they are, what exactly are we trying to prove by pretending to be flawless? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let's just keep it respectful and constructive. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.